If you have never built a gaming PC before, you have clicked on the right video. Building a gaming PC is simple. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a gaming PC from start to finish. Also, if you're a beginner interested in learning about computer parts, or you're looking for reviews, tips and advice all about gaming PCs, you can go to my website maxcomputerguide.com. It's also linked in the description. Alright, let's get into the build. To build a gaming PC, you pretty much just need a screwdriver. I've got a normal multi-bit magnetic tip screwdriver and an electric screwdriver for the harder screws, like the power supply and fans. For the parts in this build, we'll be using a Rysen 3 3300X and a GTX 1660 Super, along with a 1TB SSD and 16 gigs of RAM. This build is perfect for 1080p gaming at max settings at over 100 FPS. Start by unboxing your motherboard. Take the motherboard out of its box, along with all the accessories and manuals. Once the motherboard is out of its box, take it out of its anti-static bag and place it on the box that it came with. This motherboard has foam protection, so you will need to take that off. Cut these 4 zip ties holding the foam in place. Then grab the I/O shield and the M.2 screw that is in a tiny bag. We don't need any SATA cables because we're not using any hard drives or 2.5-inch SSDs. Once you have unboxed your motherboard, grab your CPU's box. Open the box and take out the CPU and its cooler. The CPU should be in a small clamshell type plastic casing. Open the casing and gently take the CPU out. Next, find the small triangle that is on the motherboard's CPU socket. Then find a small lever or arm on the socket and pull it up. This will open the socket, which will allow you to put the CPU in. Then grab your CPU, making sure to pick it up by the sides. Align the CPU with the golden triangle on the CPU and the triangle on the socket. Gently lower the CPU into the socket. Once the CPU is in its socket, lower the arm down until it clicks into place. Now you've installed your CPU. CPU cooler time. Before installing your CPU cooler, you will need to unscrew these 4 screws holding these 2 brackets into place. These brackets are for other types of coolers. Our cooler doesn't use this type of mounting system. Then once the brackets are taken out, put them in the motherboard's box for safekeeping. Now, grab your CPU cooler and take it out of its box, lifting it up by the top part, to make sure not to touch the bottom of the cooler where there is pre-applied thermal paste. After unboxing your CPU cooler, slowly lower the cooler down and align it with the 4 screw holes on the motherboard, with the fan cable in a good position to cable manage it later, along with the AMD logo on the cooler facing towards the motherboard's heatsink. This will make routing and hiding that ugly fan cable a lot easier. Once the cooler is on the CPU, start by slowly screwing in the cooler. One side, then the opposite side. Don't fully tighten each screw until all of them are most of the way screwed in. This will provide even mounting pressure to the cooler. Rinse and repeat for the other 2 screws. Finally tighten all 4 screws in. Next, plug the fan cable into the 4-pin fan header labelled CPU fan. I'm tying a knot to minimize the visible cable length and to hide it better. And then your CPU cooler installation is done. Next up, RAM installation. On your motherboard, find the 4 memory slots that are beside your CPU. For this build we're using 2 memory sticks, so you'll need to install them in the correct slots to take advantage of dual channel. Most motherboards will let you know which slots to install the RAM via a diagram on the board itself or in its manual. Most motherboards will say to install the RAM sticks in slots A2 and B2. To install the RAM, pull back the 2 tabs on the 2nd and 4th slot to the right of the CPU cooler. Align the gap on the RAM sticks with the notch on the RAM slot. Lower the RAM stick evenly and press down with both hands so the tabs on the slots lock into place. Do the same for your other RAM stick. Make sure that both tabs are fully locked down. You'll hear a click once the RAM is slotted into place. RAM only goes in one way, so don't worry if you think you're doing it wrong. Next, storage time. Get your M.2 NVMe drive. Find the M.2 screw that is in a small labelled plastic bag and take it out. Locate your M.2 slot on your motherboard. Then slot the drive into place on an angle. Push the drive down and screw it into place with the M.2 screw. Now get your I/O shield and align it with the text so that it's not upside down. Put the I/O shield in through the inside of the case and push it until it snaps into place in all areas and corners. Take your time and make sure all sides are in place. It will be a bit annoying and you might need to put more force, but eventually it will snap into place. Then find the screw holes on your motherboard and make sure they all match up to the standoffs on the case. For this case, we don't need to install any additional standoffs, as all of them are already pre-installed. Then, lower the motherboard into the case, holding it by the CPU's cooler, making sure to align the screw holes with the standoffs. And the I/O with the I/O. Then get this bag of screws that is found in a bigger bag that came with your case, and screw the motherboard into place at all points. These are your front panel I/O cables that connect to your motherboard. These allow you to connect USB and audio devices at the front of your case. First is the HD audio cable. This allows you to connect your headphones or speakers at the front of your case. The HD audio cable has a blank pin and needs to be plugged in here. Next is the USB 3.0 cable. Align the notch on the cable's connector with the notch on the motherboard connector and plug it in. I'm routing the cable through the top cutout for a cleaner look in this case. This connector is pretty sensitive, so don't try to bend it that much as the pins could break. Then connect these other cables that are for the power button, its LED, etc. These connectors are the most frustrating to connect as they're so small. I've put a diagram to make it easier for you. Group the multiple connectors into one little brick and connect it to these pins. Next, we're going to install the power supply. In the power supply box, you'll find the power cable to connect your PC to the wall, the additional modular cables for all the parts that need power, and of course the power supply itself. In this build we're using a semi-modular power supply, so only the 24-pin and 8-pin CPU power cable are pre-attached. For this build, you will need the big 24-pin power cable for the motherboard, the 8-pin CPU power cable, and the graphics card power cable labelled PCIe. You will only need to plug in the graphics card power cable as the 24-pin and 8-pin CPU power cable are pre-attached. I also plugged in an extra SATA power cable if an additional hard drive will ever be installed. Installing the power supply is simple. Locate the part of your case that has a rectangular cutout in the back and position your power supply towards the ventilation. Make sure that the fan is facing down. Gently slide the power supply into the case and align the holes on the power supply with the holes in the back of your PC case. Then use these 4 screws to tighten the power supply into place. Now to wire up the fans in the case. These fans use 3-pin headers for power. And in this case, there is a fan splitter included, which allows you to power multiple fans from one port on your motherboard. Connect the 2 fan headers to the splitter like so. Then for the RGB on the fan, there are 2 RGB cables from the fans. Connect the 2 RGB fan cables to the splitter. You will need to align the little triangle on each cable like so. Then find which cable you'll need to plug into your motherboard's 5V RGB header. We'll be using the cable for ASRock, ASUS and MSI motherboards. To connect the fan power cables, you need to find the 4-pin header on your motherboard and plug the fan cables into 3 out of the 4 pins to the left. Then for the RGB cable, you will need to plug it into the grey coloured 3-pin header that on this motherboard is located next to the HD audio connector. Then do some basic cable management for the fan cables. Do this by zip tying the RGB cables and the fan cables in bunches. This will make cable managing later a lot easier. Now for routing the power cables for all the parts. Firstly, the CPU power cable. You'll need to route this cable through the top right hand cutout at the back of the case, which is closest to the connector, like so. Then the 24-pin motherboard power cable. Route this cable closest to the connector, like so. Leave the graphics card power cable out, as we'll route this later. Then connect the 8-pin CPU power cable and the 24-pin motherboard power cable to the headers on the motherboard, like so. They should both clip into place. On the 24-pin motherboard power cable there is a clip. Align the clip on the cable with the clip on the connector itself. Push the cable in to connect it. The cable should clip into place. Now route the cable towards the back. Now for cable management. This whole step is up to you. Take as long as you want to manage all the cables neatly and as best you can. Group and zip tie down cables where they best suit. Then the graphics card cable. Route this cable through the cutout at the bottom of the case. Now for the good part. Unbox your graphics card and take it out of the foam that's surrounding it. Then also take it out of its anti-static bag. Take off the plastic surrounding the fan as well. Before installing a graphics card, you'll need to find out which PCIe covers you'll need to take out. To do this, get your graphics card and align it with the PCIe slot on your motherboard, and that way you'll see which slots the graphics card takes up. So for this build we need to take out slots 2 and 3. Then you will need to remove the PCIe covers. To do this, push the covers back and forth until they come out. These covers aren't reusable and can't be put back into the case. This can be frustrating, but eventually they will come out. Finally, to install your graphics card, push the tab on the PCIe slot to open it. Then align the connector on the graphics card with the slot on the motherboard and push the graphics card into place. Then find these two screws and screw the graphics card into place like so. For a clean look, zip tie the second connector coming from the main power cable. Finally, plug the connector into the graphics card to give it power. At the back of the case, tuck the cable somewhere to keep the build looking clean. Then cut the zip tie and you're done. If you're installing an additional fan to your build, follow these steps. Unbox the fan and take the screws out.
In the box you will find vibration dampeners, a SATA adapter and the screws for the fan. This fan uses a 4-pin PWM header for power. Then align the fan with the fan grill in the back of the case. Also make sure that the fan is in exhaust to exhaust all that. This arrow indicates the airflow orientation of the fan. Then find the bag of screws that came with the fan. Align the fan and screw it in. Pull the cable towards the back of the case and then pull it through the front of the case. Connect it to the 4-pin PWM header on your motherboard. In this case, it's right next to the CPU's fan header. Then close the front and side panel of your case. Then put your tempered glass side panel on.
thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to smash the like and subscribe button and share this video with your friends and family, so if they want to know how to build a gaming PC, they can with this amazing guide. And if you want to learn more about this build and gaming PCs in general, don't forget to visit my website, maxcomputerguide.com. Alright, see you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Toodles.